Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful 7th of April day here in Victoria, BC. It's a marvelous day. I've had the dog out for a walk and a play and then got her some food. So here we are going through the next tutorial number 2 for Great War Spearhead 2. Today we're going to cover the sequence of play, and we'll go through the command system really quickly as well. Before I get moving though, I had a question from somebody on bases and base sizing, to be precise. They noticed that when I put up the pictures yesterday that my base sizes were different for the 15 mil and the 6 mil. And yes, that's true. By the rules, the base size is supposed to be 1 1/4 by 1 1/4 for all your standard fighting stands, etc., and then double that for anything that you deem necessary. Villages, things like that, are usually 3 by 3. So when I was doing the first play test of the original Great War Spearhead, I was by myself. Nobody else had any World War I miniatures. I didn't have a lot of table space because I was on the move across Canada when I was still in the Navy. And so I went with 1-inch bases for all my 15s. And I decided to stay with 1-inch bases because I like the look with the 15s. With the 6mm, the 1 1/4 inch bases is what I went with because it's the more standard one and it looks better because you can get more figures on the stand with the 6 mils, and then it has a bigger mass impact. So that's the only difference. What I would tell you is just make sure all your bases are equivalent sizes, and then things really don't matter a whole heck of a lot. I wouldn't recommend going past 1 1/4 inches for anything up to 20mm. When you get to 25 or 28mm, you probably have to double the size of your stands and double the size of your distances, or the length of your distances for any measurements. Okay, so here we go. Better mention, the time scale for Great War Spearhead 2 is basically a 30-minute turn. It says 15 to 30 minutes in the rules, but that really means that you're going to be doing actions for probably half of your turn. The rest is going to be sort of stagnant. And anybody who's been in the military knows what I'm talking about. Anybody who's done anything in a large lineup or in big crowds, even sporting events, you'll understand the same thing. That 30-minute time frame encompasses a lot of different things going on, which might include tactical orders, issuing of ammunition, all kinds of things as the fight continues. Okay, so sequence of play. On page 5 of the rules, it lists out the sequence of play, and I'm just going to go through it really quickly here so we all understand. First and foremost, it's important to follow the sequence of play. If you skip a step as you're moving through your troops, doing your business in a game, just go back to the step that you accidentally skipped and do it again, because and you can either eliminate all the results you had beforehand, or you can modify it as you go. But yeah, try and follow the steps as much as possible. So the first thing that's done is you determine the initiative. An initiative is a simple die roll by your commanding chief of each side, and the high die roll wins, basically. If it's a tie, it goes to the one who did not win the turn before. There can be modifiers in there if you choose to use them, especially in a scenario you might have a real poor general who just didn't move much, so you might want to give him a -1 every time he rolls for the initiative. Whoever wins the initiative can choose to be either side A or side B. Side A moves all their forces first, then side B moves all their forces. Once that's done, so let me go back. So that's the first step. Second step is move side A. Step 2B is move side B. Step 3A is air attacks, anti-air attacks, and artillery indirect fire. This includes any barrages that you have laid out for the game. 3B is stationary infantry fire. Now, this is important. Stationary infantry, which includes your machine guns and trench mortars, fire before any moving stands fire. And then you go into all anti-tank guns, field guns, and certain propelled guns. There are some self-propelled guns in World War I, but not a lot. And then all stationary vehicle fire, then all moving infantry fire, and then all moving vehicle fire. Then we do morale checks as necessary. From the fire phase, then you conduct all close combat resolutions, and then you do any additional morale checks that are required after close combat, and finally the command phase, which is where you would issue new orders, commit reserves, and you do all the rallies from suppression that were caused in the two combat phases, shooting and close combat, to determine whether you need to make a morale check for for anybody else, like a regiment or brigade or division morale check. Okay, so that's the sequence of play. Now I'm going to talk just really briefly on the organization of forces. So in the back of the book, near the back of the book, we have the tables of organization and equipment that covers a broad spectrum of time frames and all the major armies and some of the minor armies that took part in World War I, as well as the Balkan Wars. So read through those at your leisure and try to get an understanding of how it all reads. But basically, they're all laid out in the same format, listing by corps or division and infantry and cavalry, and at the back of the TO&E, or the final part of the TO&E for each country, will be a small breakdown on the various special units like trains or armored cars, tanks, things like that. Okay, so unit types. All regiments contain specifications regarding their size, movement capability, fighting characteristics, and movement ratings. These specifications are detailed in later sections, and the regiments are composed of subunits. We refer to battalions, but the battalion is not used as a subunit per se. Companies, which is the individual stand, are really the smallest subunit that you use, except for batteries and machine gun and trench mortar platoons, which are still represented by a fighting stand of the same size, or a stand the same size as your standard infantry company or cavalry squadron. Tanks include most tracked vehicles that are equipped with cannons and or machine guns. They can be either cannon or machine gun, or they can be both in World War I. There's no effect on the arc of fire for these vehicles, because they would pivot as required. And remember, we're in a 30-minute turn, so we didn't have to worry about an arc of fire specific to a sponson mounted gun. We just use the same arc of fire as normal, which is 180 degrees off the front face of the vehicle. You have unarmored vehicles. There are some vehicles that include trucks that carry anti-aircraft weapons. There's armored cars. There's things like the Canadian MG motor car, which is armored, but it has no armored top, so if you get hit by indirect fire, it's worse than if it gets hit by direct fire. Infantry units are anything that walks on two legs. Cavalry units would include camels as well. Aircraft do play a part in Great War Spearhead, but not near as much as in later war. And it's always nice to have a couple aircraft models on the table if required. Armored trains play a role as well. And that's the other part that wasn't covered in the original rules is naval gunfire support, and both riverines, river monitors, and major warships, either destroyers and above, that could be used as well. Those are covered more in the scenario books, because there's very limited use considering the size and scope of World War I very limited use for naval gunfire support. But for areas like Gallipoli, some of the combat that took place near the big rivers like the Danube in Austria and in the Mesopotamia front, you need to have riverines, and it's covered in there. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop on this video, and we'll move on here in a minute to a quick breakdown on general organizations.